Okay, so I have a half hour today, just because
Okay.
Jamie and I are flying to an investor's wedding. But I really wanted to chat. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do appreciate you taking the time and also just approaching me about sort of what's been going on. There's been a lot of movement and the market's been shifting clearly, both on Bitcoin and then also like you wanted to talk about sort of the AI side of all of this and how that can impact your business model and what
Yeah, for
you're
sure.
working on.
Okay, great. So super pumped to be on the channel today, chatting with your audience about sort of what's been changing and what has really, how the demand for AI has changed the demand for infrastructure, and how effectively Hut 8 has been positioning ourselves to capture this sort of demand since the beginning of January 2022. So let's back out a little bit. There's been a tremendous amount of growth for demand in terms of AI infrastructure and compute. So the demand for AI has actually gone from 95 billion to 900 billion over the past year. And just for sort of additional context, Twitter, for example, gained 1 million followers, or 1 million active users, I should say, within 2 years, versus ChatGPT had 1 million active users within 5 days. And what's really exciting about this sort of nascent new technology is, number one, not only that it's incredibly industry agnostic, but number two, that all of this requires, AI and machine learning requires extraordinary amounts of computing power and server power. And what's really different about AI compute and sort of the infrastructure that's required to run it is it's not as latency sensitive as a lot of traditional data center applications like cloud and colo. And so what that means is you can effectively facilitate AI and machine learning compute and those servers in I think one of the better ways to say it is an infrastructure that doesn't have as much sort of bells and whistles as a traditional data, cloud, and co-location infrastructure would. And so why this is interesting for players like Hut is that we have effectively been anticipating this sort of shift in terms of demand since January 2022. So we actually started buying data centers back in January, but also because we're in the middle of a merger with a very large player south of the border, we think the fact that we are number one, especially with this new team that we're merging with US Bitcoin Corp, incredibly good at standing up infrastructure at scale. And incredibly, we've got in a post-merger world, we'll have a very diverse power portfolio and also be located in diverse regions. And so any infrastructure operator that, number one, understands GPU compute, which we've done, we've been working in the data center space since January 2022, and our CEO, Jamie Leverton, and our CFO, Shenif, have both been working in the data center space for over 20 years. Understanding infrastructure at scale, understanding GPU compute, having access to power, and also potential greenfield space to build, we think is going to sort of delineate where some of these existing miners like Hut 8 can actually capitalize on this growing compute demand. So.
Okay, well, that's interesting because obviously, I mean, I've spoken with Jamie, it was a couple of years ago now, but also with you over the last couple of years. And Hut had always had a slightly different approach, even to mining itself. You were doing a lot of mining with GPUs.
Exactly.
And those were pretty state-of-the-art GPUs that you had invested in. Are those now moved over to the sort of AI compute side of things?
So those GPUs we're not going to repurpose to AI because they just can't be repurposed to AI. But part of the thinking when we bought those GPUs, so just for your audience refresher, it was a limited fleet from NVIDIA. We were one of 3 customers globally to get this limited fleet of GPUs. And again, moving into sort of the AI ML space, it's very important to have those relationships along the chip supply chain. And so we feel very confident and comfortable with our relationships there. But part of the thinking when we first employed that GPU strategy was, number one, it was a really easy way to add to our balance sheet, our Bitcoin balance sheet. We were mining Ethereum and then converting it to Bitcoin. And I think we were doing it at less than something like $4,000 per Bitcoin. This is in 2021. But another added benefit of initially employing this GPU strategy was getting our in-house team really comfortable with alternative iterations of compute, because running a GPU versus running an ASIC is very different.
Yeah.
Especially in the AI and ML space too. So it's not just one of those things, let's say with AI and ML, that you can just dump a bunch of servers in the middle of the desert in a bath and use immersion cooling. That's not how it works. It does require a greater sophistication of infrastructure. And then from a cooling perspective, it's more of an HVAC, like sophisticated active cooling and HVAC systems, and for AI and ML. And so these data centers that we then started buying in January of 2022, after our team was, ramped up and comfortable with GPU compute, what's really cool about them is that, I mean, the deal came with 370-ish existing customers. And so we've already sort of got our customers, or we already had a decent customer base. But in 2 of our data centers in Kelowna and Mississauga, there actually is already built-in active cooling systems, and there is excess capacity for us, again, to go after this market. So that's really exciting for us. And then I think another thing that's very unique about Hut versus sort of, because you're starting to see a couple miners come out and say, oh, we're getting into AI. Now, what's very also unique about Hut is that we've actually been building out a customer platform for the past year. And it's not an easy thing to do, but effectively what it enables is our customers to come in and set up private environments. So sort of you can kind of look at it as a custom, an environment where you can custom tailor your own suit. So you can play with different iterations of compute and toggle back and forth. And then it also includes billing, etc. And so this is another advantage, is that a lot of these sort of enterprise data centers that do house some of these AI and ML clients, they just sort of offer they don't offer that level of customizability, because on their end, it just doesn't scale, right? They're just looking to be sort of they want the big kahuna whales, versus there's a ton of other enterprise customers that really do need that customization and would benefit from it. So that's another area that we're really excited about. And I also think, just last thing, is that it's also very timely, because there was an article that came out from this research paper called data center research body called Data Center Hawk. And right now, because of all this AI demand, the available capacity in existing data centers for customers to use AI and run machine learning compute is something like 2.8 to 5%. And so there's this real mismatch between companies wanting to employ AI, but not enough compute available for them to exercise some of these initiatives. And this is where Hut 8 comes in. So, and we have the sales team, and we've got the customer platform built, and we have excess capacity. So I think it's just really exciting, because, as a miner, a lot of people want you to, chase exahash and this, that, and the other, and we're still bullish on Bitcoin, but we really see a world where we're like an enterprise infrastructure computing platform. So if we can support the AI and ML demand, we're still mining Bitcoin. We've got a white glove mining services. Again, this is all in a post-merger world if this merger goes through. And so I think that's what's really exciting about sort of where Hut 8 is going, and what's different about us versus the miners. And again, that's why I wanted to come in and talk to your audience, because you guys are super engaged and understand the space. So yeah.
Yeah, so on that, because obviously viewers of the channel understand the Bitcoin mining model. The AI compute thing, similar in a lot of ways, but very different. So understanding, sorry, that the business model, what is the opportunity here? What's how do you assess the prospect and what the potential could be? Because obviously with Bitcoin mining, you imagine a Bitcoin price, hash rate, what kind of production you're going to be getting. These are pretty easy metrics. So how would you frame that opportunity for investors?
Yeah, for sure. So for example, well, first of all, the margins on AI compute, and again, this is just very high level. This is not me giving any sort of projections on Hut's behalf, but these are just some of the data points that we took in when we were sort of devising, does this enterprise infrastructure as a model make sense? Because again, we're still bullish on Bitcoin. We're still hanging on to over 9,000 Bitcoin on our balance sheet, but the halving is coming up it's less than a year away now. and then we have this tremendous amount of AI demand coming in. So these are some of the data points that we use to sort of justify this pivot. So the margins on AI computing customers are approximately 40%. And the average high performance compute earning per kilowatt hour, just pure bare bones AI without sort of adding any additional sort of cooling charges, is about $1 to about $1.50 per kilowatt hour. And then if you add in custom cooling on these servers, it's about $3 to about $4.50 per kilowatt hour that you can charge a customer. Okay. And that's also because since NVIDIA's latest H100s have hit the market, like this has sort of increased the efficiency, but also like the demand and also need for active cooling. Versus mining, it's about 6 cents to like 10 cents per kilowatt hour in terms of what you can earn additional. Yeah. So this is why these are incredibly compelling margins for us, and also a space that we understand. And also the catalysts for additional growth and demand in the space are much different than the catalysts for Bitcoin adoption, right? Or Bitcoin demand or hosting demand for Bitcoin mining. And so again, we kind of look at ourselves as in a post-merger world, again, if providing that everything goes well with regulators, et cetera, we look at ourselves as really like a one-stop shop for sort of all iterations of nascent compute. Plus, we still have a cloud and co-location business, and we just signed a really big customer there too. So I kind of look at Hut 8 as sort of like a call option on the growth of Bitcoin price appreciation, but also a call option on the infrastructure demand and demand for AI and ML compute, because those are sort of the two ways that you can play the AI and ML space, from the infrastructure space, or again, from the chip providers like NVIDIA, or also from the app perspective, like the OpenAI type investments. So yeah.
So operating as like a service for people trying to train their models, the revenue, that potential there is many orders of magnitude greater than, say, hosting Bitcoin miners.
I mean, yeah, given some of the data that we've looked at, it looks incredibly compelling. So
yeah, okay. So I think that pretty much clears that up. And I guess what sort of capacity, in the sense, I don't know, choose a metric here, like in megawatts are we talking about in the AI side?
yeah. So okay, so for example, right now Hut has about 6 megawatts worth of that power our data set, just traditional vanilla data centers. And I believe they're about 2/3 full. So that's housing north of 300 customers doing different iterations of compute. And then in terms of, I can't give any sort of forecast as to how much megawattage we're going to dedicate towards AI, but there's quite, if you've got your hands on chips, and again, I talked about how, again, not giving any forecasts, but I talked about how important it is to have relationships across the supply chain. So to have those relationships with NVIDIA. Our chairman, Bill, was one of the first hires at TSMC in Taiwan, one of the top chip manufacturers. So I can't really give any forecasts as to what sort of megawattage that we're going to be dedicating towards this particular strategy, because we haven't done that yet. But there's a lot more that you can sort of fill in with AI compute versus per megawatt versus, let's say, like an S19. And let me see, hold on, I'm just looking this out here. So for example, I just saw a note that I have here. You could fit approximately about 1,000 AI servers in about 1 megawatt worth of power.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so this in terms of like the equipment density, it's quite, because they just don't draw as much in a, or you can fit more of that in the same space as
Correct.
far as power capacity goes.
Yeah.
Okay, well then and then on the, because you got this side of the business, you've got your HODL stack, and obviously there's been some issues with the mining sites in Alberta. As I understand, there's you guys are coming along on that. There's been some delays in getting it up and running. I know there's been some frustration along that lines, just seeing that monthly production drop so dramatically. But with this potential merger, which, as I understand, was meant to close either end of Q1 or early Q3, So that's around now. But is there anything, I guess, any updates on that you can communicate as far as expectations on when that might close? Is it still going to happen expected in
Yeah.
Q3?
So part of the merger process when you're a Canadian company planning to re-domicile in the US is that you have to get approval from the SEC. You also have to do a couple of other things like get approval from the Competition Bureau, the Competition Board. So we did obtain that. But in terms of this process of getting approval from the SEC, it's effectively like a letter writing process where you submit your S4, they then write a letter back saying, okay, here are some questions I have. We then respond to them, submit updated S4s, you know, as business continues. So for example, initially I believe we forecast initially that in a post-merger world, our self-mining would be somewhere around like a little bit north of 5 exahash, but we're now forecasting that our self-mining, just that one piece of our enterprise infrastructure business, is going to be 7.5 exahash worth of self-mining. So really it's effectively this letter writing, the sort of pen pal relationship that you have with the SEC until they're comfortable to say, okay, no worries, you can go ahead and get this done. So initially we forecast that we were going to get this done by the end of Q2. Again, we don't have control as to when the SEC approves. You know, we certainly feel confident that things are going in the right direction. And so we've now forecast that we're hoping to close this within the third quarter. We have a stop date of September 30th. So that's sort of the date that we've all aligned that is you know, how long, sort of like the deadline that both sides have given each other to get this deal done. So, but yeah, I mean, it's looking pretty good. It's just, you know, it's a dance, and, you know, we want to make sure that regulators obviously feel ready to let us move it through.
Okay. All right, how much time we got left?
We have like 9 minutes.
Okay. So on that side, obviously, yes, that would be a big boost to your Bitcoin mining potential, not to mention a lot of hosting and other infrastructure management. So it's like a lot of instant diversification and a big boost on that side of things. And I know that at least at the beginning, and I'm not sure, the sentiment might be changing now, that that merger of equals and how that was established, and a lot has happened since then on both sides, both with Hut 8's business development and on USBTC side. They've acquired a lot more hash rate. You guys have been making movements on this AI compute side. Does that do anything to that sort of agreement as far as the size?
So in terms of the share count, we've set it up to, there's going to be a little bit over 88 million shares post close. And then we're also doing a 5-for-1 rollback into the stock. So again, it's 50-50 USBTC shareholders, and then 50% Hut 8 shareholders. It is still a merger of equals. US Bitcoin Corp has had a lot of really interesting success on a number of sort of different files as of late. So they were part of the Fahrenheit group that went for the bid for Celsius's bankruptcy assets, and that group did end up winning. I can't really talk about it too much on YouTube, but I strongly urge your audience to, you know, sort of Google what that win meant. Luxor has written some really interesting articles about it. We're really excited about what this means for you know, a post-merger world. But I can just sort of leave it at that. And then, like we've continued to sign some really interesting clients in our data center business. We signed our first government health organization in BC, which is sort of like a signal fund, in the sense that for a government entity to trust their healthcare records with you is pretty extraordinary. And also those types of clients tend to be very sticky. You know, because I don't think they want to move their, you know, private sensitive data around. And there's also 80 more other similar government entities within that province alone who are now sort of looking at, oh, wait a minute, like, wow, HUD's able to support my needs. So yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces on both sides. And so that's just why in a post-merger world, it's still a merger of equals, but we believe we're stronger than ever. So.
Okay, well, I think that pretty much answers a lot of the questions I think that we were wanting to get to. Is there anything, I guess, that you wanted to sort of highlight as far as like what to be watching for in this coming year? Where do you think we're headed?
So again, obviously I can't, disclose anything that isn't already out there, but I would just say stay tuned, because as soon as this merger is closed, like our plan is to hit the ground running. And we've got a lot of really interesting ideas in the pipeline. Would happy to be back on with Mike Ho, who's one of the co-founders of US Bitcoin Corp. In a post-merger world, he's going to be our chief strategy officer. All he has been doing is researching AI, ML, what that looks like from a strategy perspective for us. But he's also one of the guys who helped Marathon and Riot in the early days with machine procurement. So he's very, very interesting guy. Really understands sort of this entire nascent computing infrastructure tech space. So happy to have him back on in a post-merger world if you want to sort of do a deep dive into his brain. But yeah, I would just say to your audience, stay tuned. As soon as this merger is approved, we're it's go time for us. So.
All right. Well, I know mergers like can always be difficult things because you're not allowed to talk a lot about much during them.
Yeah.
Tends to be a lot of radio silence on that front. But yeah, there's something that clearly people are watching, and HUD made a new high off of a lot of these new developments. So yeah, the market seems to be changing. It's the reception towards it seems to have gone more on the positive side. So that was nice to see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and happy to come on anytime soon and just have a chat. You let me know.
All right. You enjoy your trip.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.